The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 4, Session 9, January 27th, 1981. Jim. None of us was ever greatly interested in previous incarnational experiences. Again, it's easy to lose the focus on the present moment's opportunities for growth if one becomes overly interested in one's lives before this one. The one query of this nature that we did ask of Ra elicited an answer that seemed to support our lack of interest in past lives. Carla, I do personally believe that we incarnate many times, and that we fashion, through these cycles of manifestation, complex and meaningful relationships that root deeply within our beings. When Don and I met, he has said he knew for certain that we would be together. Since what immediately thereafter ensued for me was a 4-year marriage to a fellow who wished not to be married, I once braced him for not having told me this home truth right then in 1962 and saved me that difficult 4 years. What? And have you missed all that good catalyst? He said. Both Donald and Jim had a loving and generous regard of me that is amazing unless one introduces the concept of previous connections. I have no doubt that we have served together before, in other lives and other times. An interesting bit of possible past history was expressed years ago to Jim in a psychic reading. It was suggested that in the American Great Plains frontier of the 19th century, Don and Jim were brothers, living together as farmers. I was Jim's child, Don's nephew, and I lived only to the age of 5, being sickly from birth. This was suggested as being preparation for their taking care of me in this life, as I dealt with disability, limitation, and especially psychic greeting during the time of the Ra contact. It rings true at some level with me. However, I also feel that we do not need to know anything of our past associations in order to learn and serve together at this present moment. We have all we need to meet the present moment. The rest is just details. Session 9, January 27th, 1981. Questioner. Is it possible for you to tell us anything about our past experiences, our past incarnations before this incarnation? Ra. I am Ra. It is possible. However, such information as this is carefully guarded by your mind, body, spirit, being totality, so that your present space-time experiences will be undiluted. Let us scan for harmless material for your beingness. I am, in the distortion of desire for your freedom from preconception, able to speak only generally. There have been several times when this group worked and dwelt together. The relationships varied. There is balanced karma, as you call it, each thus teacher of each. The work has involved healing, understanding the uses of the earth energy, and work in aid of civilizations which called just as your sphere has done and we have come. This ends the material which we consider harmless. The Law of One, Book 5, Fragment 5, Session 12, January 28th, 1981. Jim. In the first paragraph of the next section, one can see how easy it is for even the most serious of seekers occasionally to lose the proper attitude for finding the heart of the evolutionary process. Properly attuning one's being for efficient seeking has far less to do with what one does than with how one does it, and how one balances it or seats it within one's being with meditation and contemplation. Without the balance of the meditative attitude, the mind tends to become distracted by the mundane repetition of events, and one's lessons tend to orbit the periphery of one's being without becoming seated in the center of the being, there to provide a deeper grasp of the nature of this illusion and a sense of how to navigate oneself through it in a more harmonious fashion. We also see in Ra's next response that it is imperative that all such navigational movements of one's being be a product of one's free will choices, never to be abridged by any other being. That point is echoed again in Ra's response to Don's query about the metaphysical implications of attempting to lock a man in black in one's closet, an opportunity that we never had, incidentally. This is another good example of a line of questioning veering off into transient and unimportant information. Note how Ra ends Session 12 in Book 1, also titled The Raw Material, with hints that the correct alignment and proper orientation of the Bible, candle, censer, and water are somewhat askew. It took us 12 sessions to determine that Ra was not actually speaking of the physical placement of the Bible and so forth, but Ra was giving us a hint that our metaphysical alignment was off. Our line of questioning was misplaced from the heart of the evolutionary process. Since our contact with Ra was narrowband, that meant that Ra could not long respond to questions which were off the target. If we had allowed these distortions to remain over a long period of time, the contact would have been impaired, and eventually we would have lost the contact. The last portion of this session deals with the concept of what is called the Wanderers, and their frequently shared characteristics of exhibiting physical ailments such as allergies and personality disorders, which, in the deeper sense, seems to be a reaction against this plane's vibrational frequency. This is apparently a side effect that is due to such entities having another planetary influence in a higher density as their home vibration. They incarnate on this third density planet in order to be of service in whatever way is possible to help the population of this planet to become more aware of the evolutionary process and to move in harmony with it. These wanderers go through the same forgetting process that every other third density being who incarnates here goes through, and they become completely the third density being, even as they slowly begin to remember why it is that they have been born here. Apparently, about 1 in every 70 people on Earth is of such an origin. It almost seems to be in vogue now to say that one is from this or that planet, this or that higher density, and that one is really this or that exalted being come down to Earth to be a great teacher. It is embarrassing to us to see such a magnificent opportunity for rendering a humble service cheapened to a game of who has the most spiritual sergeant stripes. We do not hide the possibility that we may be of such origins, but neither do we, nor those of Ra, feel that such an origin is particularly remarkable. As Don used to say, "You've got to be somewhere doing something. You might as well be here doing this." Carla, I think one thing to keep in mind if we are wanderers from elsewhere is that we came here for a reason, to serve at this time, right here, in this very shadow world of Earth's third density. Yes, we suffer the results of trying to live in a vibratory range that is difficult for us, and yes, we somehow remember a better way to live. With this in mind, it becomes clearer that our main mission here is simply to live, to breathe the air, and let the love within us flow. Just the simple living of an everyday life is sacramental when the person is living with that consciousness of all is love, humming its tune beneath our words and thoughts. To live devotionally does not mean, necessarily, that one becomes a hermit or a wandering pilgrim, although if you feel called to it, blessings on your way. To me, at least, the daily things are the most holy. The washing up, the chores, the errands, all moves in rhythm, and we are just part of that symphony of all life that shares energy back and forth. I know one of the great hopes a wanderer has is to find its service. The living of a devotional life, right in the busy midst of everything, is ample and perfect service. It is what we came here to do. As we let love flow through us, others change, and as they open their hearts, the circle of light grows. We are now at a stage where the light sources are beginning to connect. Do I hear the sound of global mind being born? The global mind is a very real concept to me, as well, especially since the advent of email and the World Wide Web. With information being exchanged without pen or paper, we are basically working with light, surely one of the purer ways to communicate. As I collect stories of wanderers' blues, I am struck by how intense and constant is the general desire for a spiritual home, an identity, and a way of service. I encourage all those who experience themselves as wanderers to link up and network with other awakened consciousnesses, to live in the open heart together and allow the light to come through us all into the worldwide web of planetary consciousness. As Jim says, there is no greater service than being yourself in this sometimes refractory world. Don loved Andreja Puharich and was a loyal and generous friend to him for many years. We met Andreja in 1974 after we read the book Yuri, which he wrote, and identified him as one of the characters in our oddly prophetic novel, The Crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater, which we had written in 1968 and 1969. We helped with the now historic Mind Link of 1977, and heard from him from far and wide as he dodged bullets and various agents of various governments who thought he was up to something. Puharich was a person of immense hospitality and kindness of character, although quite insensitive to and unaware of the world and its requirements outside his work. This was a guy who got up in the morning and worked steadily, only stopping for grabbing some food, literally until time for bed. He rather ran through people, using their talents and donations as they aided the work and unaware of depleting people's resources or time, because he focused on the work before him, never on making money. This was a born scholar and a brilliant man, and much occurred in his ken. It is a loss to the world of ideas that his carefully kept journals were confiscated at the time of his death and have disappeared. I admit readily to feeling oft times that he was using Don. I felt he was a man of more energy but less wisdom than Don. I felt he should have followed Don's sage counsel at times. Don himself never felt anything like this. He was glad to help. I celebrate Andreja. What a singular and remarkable fellow, and what a contribution he made in so many ways. George Hunt Williamson was a channel we greatly admired. Indeed, we used his channeling of Brother Philip in our tape, Messages from the UFOs. We were in telephone contact with him only, and like Andreja, he never made it to our sessions. It's likely he was not too pleased at Ra's request for him to prepare. He is one of the great pioneers in UFO and related metaphysical research, and I think the first to name wanderers. He called them apples, quoting the radio-channeled UFO message, "To the apples we salt, we shall return." Session 12, January 28th, 1981. Questioner: I got a call from Henry Puharich this afternoon, and he will be here next month. I would like to ask if it is permissible for him to join in our circle and ask questions. I would also like to ask if Michael Debronovic, also known as George Hunt Williamson, could join our circle as well. Ra. I am Ra. These entities, at present, are not properly attuned for the particular work due to vibrational distortions, which in turn are due to a recent lack of time-space, which you call busyness. It would be requested that the entities spend a brief time-space in each diurnal cycle of your planet in contemplation. At a future time-space in your continuum, you are requested to ask again. This group is highly balanced to this instrument's vibratory distortions due to, firstly, contact with the instrument on a day-to-day basis. Secondly, due to contact with the instrument through meditation periods. Thirdly, through a personal mind-body-spirit complex distortion towards contemplation, which in sum causes this group to be effective. Questioner: which group was it that contacted Henry Puharich in Israel around 1972? Ra. I am Ra. We must refrain from answering this query due to the probability that the one you call Henry will read this answer. This would cause distortions in his future. It is necessary that each being use free and complete discernment from within the All-Self, which is at the heart of the mind-body-spirit complex. Questioner: would that also keep you from answering who it was that the group I was in 1962, contacted then? Ra. I am Ra. This query may be answered. The group contacted was the Confederation. Questioner: did they have any of their craft in our area at that time? Ra: I am Ra. There was no craft. There was a thought form. Questioner: if a man in black were to visit me and I locked him in the closet, could I keep him, or would he disappear? Ra: I am Ra. It depends upon which type of entity you grab. You are perhaps able to perceive a construct. The construct might be kept for a brief period, although these constructs also have an ability to disappear. The programming on these constructs, however, makes it more difficult to remotely control them. You would not be able to grapple with a thought form entity of the man in black, as you call it, type. Questioner: would this be against the law of one? Would I be making a mistake by grabbing one of those entities? Ra: I am Ra. There are no mistakes under the law of one. Questioner: what I mean to ask is, would I be polarizing more towards self-service or service to others when I did this act of locking up the thought form or construct? Ra: I am Ra. You may consider that question for yourself. We interpret the law of one, but not to the extent of advice. Questioner: is there a way for these wanderers to heal themselves of their physical ailments? Ra: I am Ra. This will be the last complete question of this time-space. The self-healing distortion is effected through realization of the intelligent infinity resting within. This is blocked in some way in these who are not perfectly balanced in bodily complexes. The blockage varies from entity to entity. It requires the conscious awareness of the spiritual nature of reality, if you will, and the corresponding pourings of this reality into the individual mind, body, spirit complex for healing to take place. Is there a short question before we close this session? Questioner: is it possible for you to tell us if any of the three of us are wanderers? Ra: I am Ra. In scanning each of the mind, body, spirit complexes present, we find an already complete sureness of this occurrence, and therefore find no harm in recapitulating this occurrence. Each of those present are wanderers pursuing a mission, if you will.